love doing these interviews because I learn so much about people. For those who don't know, Don called me up like one day 5 years ago during the pandemic, and we had the most wonderful conversation. And we had never met. I just thought you were so gracious and lovely to do that. And we really like are very aligned in so many ways. So yeah, it's really great to I felt like we were you were kindred spirit all the way over there. I'm up in Toronto. Don's in you're in LA, right?
Los Angeles, yeah.
So when I saw that you had announced your retirement, I was like, oh my God, we need to speak to the queen. To me, you're the queen. To a lot of people, you're
Oh,
many things to so many people. But I was really, really amazed to learn, for example, that I didn't know you were a mom and a grandmother, and that you were an original Los Angeles Rams cheerleader. What? That's incredible. Of course, I knew about your lobbying efforts to get script supervisors their own category on IMDb, which you succeeded in, as well as the fact that you were president of IATSE Local 871 for 4 years before the pandemic. Incredible. And, I'm sure everybody knows your credits. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put your wonderful reel that you made, the retrospective. I'm going to
okay.
connect it under this video so people can see. But, in case you're tuning in and you don't know, Dee has done, little films like Black Panther, Creed 2 and 3, Sister Act 2, Fences, Godzilla, Kong, Star Wars 8 and 9, Star Trek. Like it goes on. It's incredible. Her accomplishments both on and off set. And I'm so, so honored, Don, that you're speaking with us today.
Thank you for, inviting me. I always want to lift up and elevate the craft. And so now that in my retirement, I kind of have that time. And it's always a pleasure. It's always, and thank you for inviting me.
So, this is something I ask everyone because I'm super curious because we all have different origin stories. What drew you to the profession and why did you stay?
I was like I say, a Rams cheerleader. I was 18 and that's why I started out as talent. And we did commercials. And back in the day, it was just AFTRA and SAG and SEG, Screen Extras Guild. And I got into all of them. So I was a talent at first and started getting bored. I was working. I've always worked in this industry, and I started getting bored. And I started looking around, and I figured out that I liked being on set. And when I'm a little older, I am 66, will be 67 this year. And so when I was growing up, it was all about learning how to be a secretary. That's all that they, be a secretary or a housewife. That was kind of it because I was born in the late 50s. And so, like, I had those secretarial skills. And so, when I started looking around the set, I really liked the camera. And so they would let me be, because sometimes I would be standing in on a show or something like that. And so they would let me get on the camera. And because I could type, I used both of my hands. And I was like, I could do the wheels and everything else like that. And I realized that I had composition. Then when I started to look and I learned how to load film, I could do that because I was, tactile type of a thing. And then I started looking around and I was like, I didn't want to schlep all that equipment. And so then I think I was doing some extra work on like Knots Landing. Show how old I was. And I saw someone and they said, and I said, so what do you do? And they said, I'm the second, like a secretary on the set. And so secretarial resonated with me. They said what it was. And I went to the library and I found Pat Miller's book. And so I started reading it. And I realized that I was paying attention when I was on set. I just didn't know what things were called. And I didn't even know I was paying attention. And I had so many skills for a script supervisor that I didn't know. I was observant and didn't know I was observing. So I started looking at that book. And then I did put my money in to take Randy Feldman's class. And it was a summer of 89, and they sent it back because I guess she didn't have enough students. So I was just like, okay, well, then I just continued reading Pat's book and asking questions. I'm on set, I'm working on set. And so I would just ask questions. I think I signed up for a cinema photography course at UCLA Extension. And, because I knew that I liked the camera and stuff. And then 1990, January 1990, I just put out like this flyer to the film schools, UCLA, USC, and they called me and I just started kind of sort of doing it and like learning a little bit on my own. And then I did this flyer that had my picture because back in the day you used to put your headshot on a business card. And so I had it like, you know how you have when people tear off the little notices? Well, I had one of those, and that's what I had sent out. And John Singleton had taken it, but he didn't call me until like maybe May. And we did some kind of music video. I still can't even remember, who it was with. And then and so in between that and he calling me to interview for Boys in the Hood, I took a class and I took Jim Kelly Durgan's class. May he rest in peace. And then I got Boys in the Hood, and then I ended up having to take private lessons with Jim because I needed to get it. I needed to get all of it, And yeah, I was just kind of like the paperwork. I had that down because I got that secretarial skills and organization and all that kind of good stuff. And I think I went back one time, one week after I did Boys in the Hood to show Jim my work. He showed me a couple of things, and then that was it.
You stayed obviously because you loved it and you were hooked, or was there another
Well,
reason?
I was a mother, I was married young, when I was younger. And so I had two kids to raise. And
Wow.
so I don't mind working, love work, but I had children to raise. And so when I got into production, I did not know it's going to be that many hours. And so I just kind of adapted. And then I needed the money, and then the money is good. And then I was working, and I just kind of sort of stayed and liked it. Found out that, filmmakers are storytellers, and found out that, I'm a storyteller and filmmaker. And just my approach to the craft, because I didn't really shadow anybody. I didn't see nobody told me the rules,
Yeah.
and so the way that I do the craft, I was enjoying it. I was like, they were listening to, I was putting my little 2 cents in and they were listening, so
Yes.
so I kind of liked it, and I just kept at it. And then I was working with really good people in the craft, some of the top tier people in our craft. And yeah, it was enjoyable. And I'm a filmmaker. And so I just kept at it.
We're so aligned that way. I also never got to train anyone. I also read Pat P. Miller's book. That was bless Pat P. Miller for writing that book because that was our lifeline back then, 1990, 1991 when we started. Yeah, and I feel that too. If I didn't feel like we were filmmakers, I don't think I could have lasted this long. And if I didn't have that sense of contribution, which I see eroding. We'll talk about that, but things are starting to erode that we have to fight back against with our excellence, right? I know we both feel that way. Now you're one of the few script supervisors who also became a union president. So I would guess that you did that because you wanted to change something about the industry. What did you want to change and what do you think still needs to change? These are big questions, I know.
At first, I was a board member. And the reason why I joined, because at the times they were trying to buy a building, but during Christmas time when no one was paying attention. And I can't remember her full name, but she like alerted everybody to say, hey, y'all need to pay attention because this is not the building that we should be buying.
Mm.
I don't like sneaky stuff. Why not be truthful? But because it was during Christmas time and no one was paying attention, there was an underground current that started, and we all started to get together, underground movement, I guess it was what you call it. And so then we like stopped it because it wasn't good for us. And so then that made me go and be on the board. And so then you kind of like learn the governance and all that kind of stuff on what that means. And then I was asked to run to be the president to shake things up. And I think I did. I think I did a pretty good job I always allow people to talk. And
Mhm.
for whatever reason, people don't want other people to talk. So it's like I give people permission. I don't know. I just believe in fairness. And I believe that you have to like hear everybody out in order to make a good decision and stuff like that. And at the time, we just needed some new blood, we just needed some new blood, and their new ideas, that kind of a thing. And it was interesting because I was still on the road. So you have a very a working president. And I just want to say one thing about, I think that everyone should try to at least go to all the union meetings, at least try and get that in there, and get into a committee, just to see, so that you maybe your voices can be heard, because unfortunately a lot of the people that are on the boards and stuff like that, no shade to anybody, but they're not working. I experienced that when we went to negotiations, where someone who is not a to me was not a script supervisor who even held a show, that was on this negotiating committee trying to make decisions, and like I had to like say something. So a lot of times people that are on these committees who have the time are not necessarily working. And so to have working people, it takes a commitment. You just have to, I think if you're going to be a union member, you should kind of pay your dues and go on in there and try to like be helpful.
You were like deep, deep, deep in your career. I was doing my first TV series when I was on that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was interesting. I think that there was one of the things that, just like it seems like I'm not very political.
Mhm.
I say what I say. I think I'm respectful, but like my self-esteem is not wrapped up in a title. And so that's why you just need like real, be down to earth and real people to try to move the needle, whatever the goal is, to try to move that needle. And one of the things as president that I did see is that like that now I'm behind the curtain. Now I can kind of like see all the players and kind of like get a general sense of what's really going on. And so my goal was to just make it better and to give people permission to like do stuff. People were being shackled for whatever it behind the power and all like that kind of stuff. And that kind of stuff never like really affected me.
It sounds like you really democratized 871.
Well, I just, was able to give people just I don't know, the motivation to just come out and say, and bring out new ideas, try something new, because I'm like down for that kind of stuff, but it takes passion.
Passion, energy, vision. I mean, really, right?
Yeah, it's a lot, because you do get, you're gonna get people pushback, but there's nothing wrong with that. Can we all agree to disagree? It's like just you're not gonna, necessarily believe in what I believe, or think that that's a good idea, and that's fine. But then the
Yeah.
discussion comes, and this goes back to the create, we're in a very creative environment. One of the things that I would say that has kept me in the industry is that I have seen actual creativity in motion. I might say to a director something, and they'll get this look on their face and go, and then go off. They don't necessarily go off and do what I just said, but it sparked creativity. It sparked something in them, and they're like, oh, and it gave them another idea. That to me is just great to see and great to be a part of.
Oh, yeah, it's such a great feeling. And I understand what you mean about carrying that over into building our unions and our craft, like just the new ideas and vision for our craft. I think we were talking about, I was saying to Dee that we need solidarity across all locals. And she's like, we need solidarity across our profession. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more? Yeah.
Yes, and like I say, when I was president and going behind the curtain and just kind of like seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah.
I'll start with one. Script supervisors complain too much and no one is doing any action. And so the one complaint is, oh, no one knows, what we do. No one knows, we don't get the respect. And I will say that the onus is on us. We are not out there beating our own drum. We're not in the spaces to teach, to train, to present to the directors, the producers, even camera, or go to the Editors Guild to show our value, To this day, I have not heard one time a script supervisor presenting any kind of presentation to the DGA or the Producers Guild. These are the people that make the decisions of all the stuff that we complain about. But have we gone to them and to show them our value to put a presentation together? No.
I do that in Canada. I went to the Cinematographers Guild and the Directors Guild.
All right, very good. Now I can say I know one person, but it's like an ongoing thing. We
Yeah,
all have
absolutely. We all need to do it, right? We all need
we
to.
all it should be like we all have an education committee. Even the DGA has an education committee, and they're always looking for content. They're
Yeah.
always looking for something, and
Yeah.
we just have not really done it,
Mhm.
and again, it takes passion and it takes time.
Yes. Yes. And it also, I mean, I know not everybody's a teacher. I know we're both called to be teachers and we both have honed those skills and not everybody is that, but we can represent ourselves. And so, I mean, look at the books that Pat and Mary wrote, like incredible, right? There's ways we can educate through action and just getting involved. And you know what I love the most is when script supervisors talk to each other. Like that's,
Yeah, and we should be talking to each other because it's like this is what I say. If you want a hamburger, because it was one of the questions that you had asked me to talk about, kind of like my system or like how I look at the craft. If you want a hamburger, you can go to 10 joints to get a hamburger. Just depends on what kind of hamburger you want. And if you look at directors or people who want to be the directors, they'd be like, "Oh, I really like." They study Scorsese. I can't even say his name. Uh,
Scorsese,
Scorsese.
Scorsese,
Scorsese.
Scorsese, Martin
Whatever.
Scorsese. Yeah.
But like if you want to, directors, even famous directors, they've got like two, three, four directors that they admired and studied from. And
Yeah.
I think script supervising the craft, script supervision as the craft, it should be the same way. You can you have your foundation, but you kind of keep building. And one of the things that I just thought was just interesting in our craft, and and I would see it when maybe I have a second unit or someone would come on and looking at their work or whatever, a lot of times people don't know why they do what they do.
Mhm.
They were taught and they just kept with it. They didn't evolve. This craft has evolved, and so you have to evolve. You have to like look at, oh, well, maybe I should be looking at it this way, or oh, that kind of a thing. And it seems like to me that once people take a class or something and start working, they don't ever take no other class. They complain.
I love when people take all like we have people in I know in my program that have studied with me, you and Randy, and some people have studied with other people, and some people have trained with privately. And I love embracing all because I mean everyone's unique. All our brains are different. We're going to get something different from everybody. And I love when people take that plus their life experience and they become that unique. We're all so unique, you know, and there's never enough of us because directors, there's so many different kinds of directors. And I know that might sound offensive to people in LA who are telling me like it's dead for work there. But do you still feel like there's my whole career, I felt like there's never ever been enough of us.
Well, I didn't realize until that 2020, during COVID, when we were all sitting at home. And then what had happened was that I was part of a program. I knew a producer who worked at Netflix, and she started a program for minorities to meet producers. And so I had realized that every time I would meet a new set of producers, they were asking me a couple of things, the same things. When are you guys going to get assistance? When are you going to have an apprenticeship program? And that there's a lot of you that are really are close to retirement, and there's going to be this big gap. And so I was just like, why are they like saying that? And so I started investigating. And what it is that we aren't growing as a craft. Our numbers are going down. And that's one of the reasons why I reached out to you. I don't remember, you were on that one when we had New York and everybody, we had all the people. It's like, yeah, I was like, this is something, because I think that there's a couple of things that script supervisors, and I think we should stop saying that we're a department of one. I don't never say that. When you get another unit and then you get a double up day and then you might get it started another unit, you got like four script supervisors on the head. Yeah, that's our department. We're maybe one day we're a department of one, but 2 days later we might be a department of three, a four. So we need to stop saying that, because I think when you say you're a department of one, all you're thinking about is yourself.
True. Oh my goodness.
You're not expanding your mind. And so that's one. And then a lot of people are, to me, doesn't have a foundation. They so scared that someone's going to take their job. I have never thought anybody's going to
I,
take my job
Me neither. Yes.
because I'm secure in what I got going on. But what's for me is for me. And so a lot of people are scared to like bring on somebody else and stuff like that, or to teach somebody, or like, not tell somebody something. I'm just, that's just not me. We being teachers, we have a different mindset. We want to show, interested. We already know not that many people want to be script supervisors. A lot of people don't even know about the craft still. And then when someone walks up to you and says something like, "Oh, I'm kind of interested," we're like, "Oh, okay, here, come on. Mm, here's a road," where a lot of other people get like, or other script supervisors go, "Oh, well, this is so hard." I remember asking a script supervisor early on before I really got into it, "Do you teach?" And they were like, "Oh, no," they kind of like try to shy me away. Whereas the reality is that our craft is not growing. We
Yeah.
need to go out and bring in more people, which not just for the main script supervisor, but for that assistant.
Yes, and can I tell you something that so Netflix puts their money where their mouth is because after we talked, I got this offer to do 13 the musical and I couldn't do the show and actually no one in Toronto was available to do the show. I put a nationwide call out. I said, "What about if I do this? Bring me on for 2 weeks as," and so I've created a new category in IMDb called Mentor Script Supervisor. And they paid
Okay.
me yeah, they paid me to lead on in prep and on set even though Michaela did not need training in any way, just to reassure the studio that they could handle a big picture. And then they took over the rest of the show. It was incredible. And I was like, oh, that's one way we can actually, even when I was brand new, I never felt like someone was going to take my job. We have this abundance mindset, but we're also there's a reality. We're tired. We're we're getting older. We're aging out. We need to pass along the knowledge so that everything can get better beyond us. And I know there's not enough because there's constantly they want people, but they want the best and most experienced people. And it's like it's not going to happen unless you provide the means or we provide the means to bring people into the profession on a more consistent level, all different kinds of people too, because in Toronto, I live in one of the most diverse cities in Canada, the most diverse neighborhoods in the city. I walk onto set, my first union set. I'm one of three women. There's two people of color on the whole set. There's 300 people working. I'm like, where am I? This is not where I live. This is not, and this was the industry I walked into in 1991. It was 1993 by that point when I was on a union set. And I was in complete shock. I'm like, there we have a problem of access to the industry. That's changed a little bit, don't you think? But it's
I think it's changing. I think that there's a lot more opportunity now as far as our craft. Again, it goes back to the same thing. We ain't going out there beating our drum. We're not going out there and exposing people to our craft. These kind of things are helpful because people will stumble upon it, through the years. People say, "Oh, I saw your video or I saw your podcast." And years ago that, and my memory is starting to get faulty, but years ago, when we were opening up our union, and it was something that the union was opening up, and I can't even remember what year it was. And I remember being able to get a room in Paramount Studios. I must have been working on the lot or something. I don't know how I finagled it, who knows, to do a seminar about introducing script supervising to the people. And so, because the union was opening up. And I remember working that day, had 2, 3, 4 hours of sleep, and I'm sitting in there, and I think it's Brian. Now I think forgot his name. He's always on Facebook. He was in that seminar, and he said that he told me years later, and also Pat Miller was in there. And so
oh,
I had Pat Miller's book, and I had said, "Yes, this is Pat Miller's book." And she stood up, "I'm Pat Miller," and I said, "See, you don't never talk bad about people."
I
May
mean,
she rest in peace.
may she rest in peace. And
If she's
bless
rest.
her for giving us that. But that was literally my first because, I went to film school. There was nothing about now I go to film schools as I'm sure you do to tell people what we do and say, this is how you can best use us. We were talking about assistants and and this still boggles my mind because as I get older, I'm like I've always had, back in the day, back in the 90s, it was really, really always easy for me to have a trainee on set. They would volunteer. They wouldn't pay me, but I always felt bad. They had to volunteer for 6 weeks or more, like 2 months or whatever on their own time. But it was never oh no, you can't. Productions always allowed it until about 2001, around 9/11. Everything clamped down, and I could never like easily have a trainee on set anymore. In some countries they have the opportunity to have a trainee, but here I've only been able to successfully negotiate for one like twice in Canada. It's crazy. And we're, and I know the same is true in many parts of North America where it's always a fight. And yet sometimes you see dailies, in the prop department carrying chairs, a whole team of four. As we try to we get resistance from two camps, from the producer who thinks of it as an extra expense and not thinking of the future of the profession, and also of our own health and sanity on the show and the contributions our assistants make. But I find, and I don't know if you're finding this in LA, I find we get resistance from our own peers saying we don't need that category. Whoa.
Yeah, it's again, I think it goes to that department of one mindset that they're
Mm.
only thinking about themselves. I have had calls from people who say, okay, I might be, contributing to that. How would I use an assistant? So I wanted to talk about department heads, kind of a thing. So this
Yes.
is the whole thing, is that we don't know how to use the assistants. I know because I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
because I've been volunteering for years that like any kind of program, if I find out that they got some kind of internship program, I will, go and volunteer and stuff like that because I know the importance of spreading the craft. So I already know how to do it and I know how to teach it and I've like, figured out my little system of how to do it. We don't know how. So we're not teaching each other as script supervisors how this should be part of the learning, is
Mhm.
to be a department head. And so one of the things that we're missing, yes, we're going to get a pushback, but we're not even together as script supervisors to know how to ask for an assistant or,
Mhm.
and all the little things that we could be looking at and say, hey, I need another person. So as another script supervisor, when you brought someone on, you're going to find something for them to do.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, I see Victoria Porter in here, and she's in Atlanta, and I was in Atlanta. We were doing additional photography for something. She was on second unit, and they came early. They were going to take over from where we were at. So they were just kind of waiting. I brought her in. I said, I need the next scenes up because it was additional photography. So it wasn't, the scene numbers weren't falling in order, or, and they got some weird numbers, now we're in additional photography and they got the weird scene numbers. And so I needed to know what the next scene up letter would be. And I needed to know the page count.
Mhm.
So while she's sitting there, that's what Victoria was doing for me. And she was getting all that to kind of sort it together. So yeah, I put her to work. And by the time she finished it, she was out there. Then they like called her out to go do a shot. Or we don't even know that if you work for me for second unit, no, you don't just get to sit there. Come and sit in, and watch the scene because you're getting ready to take it over. Instead of be doing this secondhand, okay, this is the continuity. You saw the continuity. So we just are all just kind of gonna go over it ourselves. We don't know how to act like a department. We
Hmm.
weren't taught.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, 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 that's true. But do you think that that's why people are afraid of even introducing the position into the local, or what? Like I sense this fear of it.
Yeah, because they're just worried about themselves. Now, one of the things that did happen during the COVID, and we had that call out and we had all this discussion, we had a discussion amongst ourselves in Los Angeles, and we did a couple of meetings, and then we got down to 7 people who committed in August of 2020 to meet every weekend, and we started to break down the things that we needed to elevate the craft. And we
Oh,
were able to split off in about to 3 to 4 subcommittees. And one was the apprenticeship program, which I'm understanding they're on the verge of getting their first thing going. They've got the curriculum. They're, it's always about money. And so, but I hear that they are very, very close. And then the other was who there was another subcommittee that figured out when to have an assistant. And so I think they got their information together, when to ask for it, how to look, all this kind of stuff, but they haven't shared or distributed that information. So the information is there because you have to do a little bit of research. You have to do a little research. You got to know how much it's going to cost. You got to know all these kind of things because that's what department heads do.
yeah.
The makeup department looks at that call sheet and says, okay, you got a prelim. And so tomorrow it's going to be heavy. I'm going to need some more assistance. We don't look at the call sheet and do that.
I look at the schedule and prep and ask, and often I'm told no, but sometimes they say yes. So, and I think if the more we ask, the more they're used to hearing it and maybe thinking about it, you know?
And that's what's happening. It may happen right away. I started looking at the schedule and prep to see if I'm going to have second units or not.
Yeah.
And then I go right away, like day one, and we're going to talk about like this second unit day that you have here. I'm going to, about, because sometimes they try not to have a script supervisor or they don't think about it
Yeah.
because it's not their job, but they kind of sort of don't think about it. It is our job, as
Mhm.
this is our department. And why wait a day or two before we go and do a second unit day to say, hey, what about the second unit script supervisor? See, when I got started and started doing television, the coordinators were the ones supplying the script supervisors. And first day, I put a stop to that. No, this is my department. I'm going to bring in who I want to bring in, who I'm used to working with. Sometimes you are working with people that they're loyal. They had other script supervisors that they're loyal to, and that's fine. But it shouldn't be the coordinator's job to call the second unit or the double up day or whatever script supervisor.
Yes.
That should be ours. They don't do that to makeup. Makeup probably has a list of people that they use. Call these people first, and then if you run out, let me know, and then I might take a suggestion from you. But yeah, that kind of stuff. I put a stop to it right away because I did
Yeah.
that didn't seem right.
So I lost a job, and I'm willing to walk away and lose a job if this happens. I lost a job last year because it was it was a low budget feature, but it was really heavy. They were going to pay my rates, but they weren't going to give me an assistant. There were 14 leads who were teenagers, and I pointed out that listen, and these are not professional actors the way that other movies had more professional actors. I said this movie is really a prime example of a movie that can use an assistant full time. I just think we have to keep putting it in their faces and painting the picture for them because they don't see the world through our eyes, right?
No, they don't. And then script supervisors, we kind of they kind of sort of do it. We need to talk about stuff like when you go in for a job, and again, this singer might, oh, I'm afraid I'm gonna lose this job if I tell you I went for an interview. But if you go for an interview and they say what's your rate or what's your thing and everything's like that, we do need to share that information so
Oh
that
yeah.
that person that they call, she should have said the same thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the next person that called, she should have said, or they, because it could be a
yeah.
man, they should have said the same thing. That
Yeah.
is kind of what we need because that's what kind of the other
Mhm.
departments and crafts do. They're a
We
little bit
do
more
that in Toronto.
unified.
We learned a certain point 10 years ago. We all sat down and realized we were making all different kinds of things, rates that had nothing to do with our experience and nothing to do, so we all settled on a bottom line that was, and, here's the other thing that I'm always harping on about. Television is harder than features. Like to me, like we both do big features, we both do big television. Television is harder, and yet I don't know if it's the same way in LA, it pays a lot less in many other locals.
Yeah.
So I'm all about one rate because we're the only department, one of the few departments in television talking to the showrunner every day. We're not only a department head, we're a department head that is talking to the showrunner every day on so many TV series. And it's like, it really, you're going to pay me less than a feature where I just have to focus on one story. So for the past 10 years, once I figured that out, I just charge one rate. It doesn't matter what it says in the book. And then we stick by that collectively as much as we can by talking to each other and saying what those rates are and everything. And I know we have great disparity from local to local and country to country about our rates, but we could at least try to get, local solidarity or national solidarity at least, right?
Yeah, we have to talk about not being scared to talk to each other about these things. And then when we go on a job and they're asking for something and say, hey, this is what I asked for. It's not just the rate, it's just anything else. I remember years
Yeah.
ago, we get an hour after wrap
Yeah, same
or,
with us. Yeah.
okay. Well, some people will say, well, I could do my rap quicker. So
Well, they could, but then they have to prep the next day, don't they? Like the work can be endless.
again, the habits, but like
Yeah.
someone fought to get that hour. People,
Yeah.
especially if it's in the contract, people fought to get that. Don't do less than. And
Yeah.
if you do less than, be quiet about it. Like you said,
Yeah.
do something else or just take your little, you get a half an hour, one day you're quick, the other day you not. That kind of thing. It's like, especially if it's in a contract.
Oh yeah, and it's not,
People fought for that.
it's not in everybody's contract. It's interesting. Like, but it's a matter of habit, practice, tradition, but it's literally not all these things like camera fees are not in our contract in Toronto, but we've always had them and we've always negotiated for them and they've always been given. But there's a whole new generation of producers coming up who are like, what's a camera fee? What's prep? What do you do in prep? And we have got to educate them.
We have to have the tools to be able to ask for it. You
Yeah, and we have to ask for it. Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
we have to ask for it and know that, and it's like we don't do any classes, we could in classes that I say that like we could do a Facebook group or something like that they talk or that we talk about deal prep, like
Yeah.
how do you make your deal and just talk about the semantics of that,
Mhm.
talk about, on a technical level, to change the mindset, to educate those that are already out there doing stuff, and then the new script supervisor that is coming up to start giving them this language so that they can go in and try to negotiate, be it non-union or union.
Yes. We have that. It is part of my program. I find it extremely important. And because we have, like, I've got 30 countries in there, it's hard to get an equality across the world.
Yeah.
But we do talk about all the points that we need to ask for. And some countries, they just don't get a kit fee, for example, but at least they know that other people do and they can get together and start to ask for stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, it's just, and it just takes, well, that's people that's taking your class, but then there's a lot of people who don't take
I
your class.
know,
So
I know.
like to me, there is a lot of activity online, be the Facebook groups or whatever. And again, it takes passion. It takes passion to be able to go out there and do these things. I
Yeah.
have all kinds of ideas, but like I don't have right now the energy to do that. I am retired, but I still have things that I gotta like get together and stuff. And one of the things that, and it's funny because it's probably even people out there working. I got burnt out.
Yes. Yeah.
I got burnt out in pushing the craft and elevating the craft. I got burnt out in working and I didn't realize it as much. I did realize it about the craft and feel like I was pushing a boulder up a hill because I believe I have a big picture of how to look at things. And I realized when I snap and want to curse you out, it's time for me to walk away. I don't want to disrespect anybody. I'm burnt out. I'm burnt out. So I said, okay, I'll just start to focus in on my students and maybe try to implant my mindset on them, implant my legacy of thinking and then, and passing it on and trying to motivate people to have the passion because it takes passion to do it. And I didn't get into being a board member and then the president until like 2013 but I joined in 1992. So
Oh,
I was, again, it took me a minute before I even was even thinking about it because of that one incident that happened. So if I could implant and get people, so that it'll be in the back of their mind, that they may be like, oh, well, let me just go on and join a committee, or someone called you to do a presentation and go, don't say no. Maybe you can go, go spread the word. But if you're not interested in spreading the word, if you ain't, and just like let it pass or whatever, it takes passion.
I did by the way, there's a panel on my YouTube channel called International Assistant Script Supervisors Roundtable because I had a colleague here say, stop trying to make an assistance a thing. It's not a thing. And I said, pardon me, it's been a thing
It is a thing. Yeah.
for decades in many countries. And so I just pulled people from different countries. And so you can see how they talk about how, that's like there's so many, the possibilities are endless. But let me tell you, and I mean, you know this, but for the people listening who are young, once you start, for me, it was once I started hitting 40, I'm like, because also we when I hit 40, when you hit or almost 50, that's when the industry started to ramp up with the number of cameras and the number of the shortening of turnaround time. That's when I really started to feel the like exhaustion and I was like, what? So we're going to increase our cameras and our workload, but we're not going to allow us to increase our department. It didn't make any sense to me. So once you start aging in this profession, even if you were resisting an assistant, I feel like you're going to wish that you had fought for it, when you could.
Yeah, oh, hindsight is 2020. I remember when I was working over in Europe, and I would ask for the assistant also because that is their
Yeah.
standard.
Yeah.
Why would I do less?
Yeah.
Because people have been fighting for it. So that was one of the things that I made sure that I did, and then also they are the producers, because you have a lot of American producers going over there, they trying to not use them. And I remember a very experienced script supervisor said she was doing a big movie too. I think she was doing one of the Bond movies or something like that. And they were trying to not to have her an assistant. And she said, if you don't have an assistant, I ain't doing the job. And they were like, oh.
That's great. I like to say that if the script really calls for it, which many scripts do, you're like, I can easily see how to use an assistant here, 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 and here, or every day. I can make a case for it, and I don't mind if they say you're not getting the job. Like I'm ready to walk away and have a better lifestyle.
You have to, I believe that what is for you is for you.
Yeah.
I only want to be where I'm supposed to be. That has been my mantra from, it's been my prayer. I only want to be where I'm supposed to be. And when I'm there, I want to be a blessing. I want to be, to add to the story, to make the story better, to be a blessing on set, to, all the people that are around me, and, that type of a thing. That's just kind of how I've always looked at it.
Amen. That's beautiful. Yes, I feel like what is for us will find us, and we just have to be open to it. We just have to not fear saying no if something doesn't feel right, and being ready to walk away because knowing you're opening a door for something even better. And it's funny because we've been living through these hard times recently, very hard times in the industry, and people get really, really upset when projects go down. And I've had multiple times, even in the past, especially in the past year, where people have lost a show, and I'd say, or like, they didn't get a show for whatever reason, or they were let go of a show for a reason that wasn't their own, their own fault or whatever. And I say, congratulations, the door is now open for you to get something better. And you want to know what? 9 times out of 10, they got something better that they couldn't have gotten if they were on that other show.
Exactly. I've gone in a couple of interviews that like I didn't get the job, and I'm disappointed because I wanted the job, but then I come to find out it was a horrid show.
Yes, yes, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, so yeah, I only want to be where I'm supposed to be. Just like today, I'm here because I'm supposed to be here.
Aw,
And
thank
enlighten
you.
somebody, hopefully that's my prayer, is that it enlightens somebody, that it sparks some kind of creativity in somebody, or sparks a passion to have a passion for your craft, especially
Yeah.
if you just in it. But like you were saying, yes, we're getting older. I remember a script supervisor telling me that her boyfriend was mad at her because she didn't feel like getting up that Saturday morning to cook some kind of breakfast. And I said, we've got to help our loved ones to understand if you are a working script supervisor and you worked 5 days a week, we work a job and a half. 40 hours is supposed to be a work week. We work 70 to 90. So you work in a job and a half. But you had 5 days a week, your loved ones, to do whatever it is that you asking me to do on a Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, it is really, I don't know how it's incredible to me that you were able to, anyone who's able to raise kids and be a working script supervisor, I am in awe of you. I can't even imagine.
To be honest, I did not know it was going to be like this until I got into it because you don't just all of a sudden work it every day, once you get into it, it builds,
Yeah.
right? So that was one thing. And then once I like, because my kids were like 8 and 14 when I started really getting into production. I I do not, and still kind of don't, teach anyone that's a mother and has small kids.
Hmm.
I call them up and I tell them about my personal story because even though my children knew I was at work, they're still kids. If they fall down and hurt their knee, they still want mommy there. And I just used to say the craft is going to be there, but I didn't want to be responsible. I wish someone would have told me
Hmm.
because there are just times I didn't miss too much, but just not being there. Like, it's funny because they're all grown now. They telling me all about myself now. They telling me all the stuff that like I did wrong. And so one of the things that and recently has been coming up, and you have to be open to it. Got to be open to hear, is that they knew you were home, but you were asleep because I was tired. You were home, but you didn't want to go nowhere. They're telling, and it was like it was true, you
Oh.
know, or yeah, it was true. And then just recently, one of my daughters called me a workaholic, and I had never thought of myself as a workaholic. And I still haven't did a deep dive in it because I don't even know the actual definition of a workaholic. It just kind of surprised me because I never thought of myself as a workaholic. And then I discussed it with the other daughter, and she says, "Yeah, all you did was work because I was raising kids." So I think, and I didn't have a husband. It would be, I think it's different if you have a partner.
Hmm.
If you have a partner, then they may be able to take up some of the slack. If you look at some of the grips or, they all got partners and stuff like that, or wives or something like that, they don't have to wash their clothes. They got food waiting for it. They didn't have to go grocery shopping. These little things that is more helpful. But yeah, no, I kind of deter. I'm not going to teach you if you're a mother with kids.
Oh, well, I do this whole thing called I had a whole warning thing because I got very sick in my 30s. Like I had a cancer scare and like I'm very much a realist. You'll see a video on my channel where I analyzed all the obituaries of IATSE members. So this is in Toronto and then someone did the study in Vancouver and she found really similar results like our longevity is like our average age of life is 59 and in Vancouver it's 50, sorry, it's 58 in Toronto and 59 in Vancouver. So independently we did this. We just were like, I want to, because we started noticing people around us dying. I'm very much a realist. So I mean, I will train people who have a passion, but I will give the big warnings because we have to change, we have to adapt our lifestyles. This is one of the questions I wanted to talk about. How do we take care of ourselves? This industry is brutal. In the best of times, it's brutal, right? And in the worst of times, it's very brutal. What have been some of your ways to have longevity in this business?
Well, I think that you do have to take herbs or,
Hmm?
take vitamins. I'm more in a herbal kind of a thing. Like, ginseng is good for energy in your brain. We use our brain, right?
Mhm.
We have a mental craft. And so you should really be looking at things that helps preserve your brain and memory and all like that. Because a lot of times, yeah, you're not supposed to, we use our memory regardless, even though you're supposed to write down some key stuff, but yeah, we use our memory. And so brain stuff. I think that, and it took me a little bit, like if you do get a television show, and I think, you might, instead of trying to do the whole thing, is to rotate.
Yes.
That will help you. But a lot of people, oh, me, I was just too nosy and just needed, well, not, I always say I was too nosy, but really it's because I was raising kids and I needed the money. you
Mhm.
know and but you might have to do that, and then also to not be afraid to take some time off, especially if you're on a series, that you can take that day off or whatever, just like men. I don't want to say just not men, just like grips and people who have a bigger department. We think that, oh, we can't, we're the only ones and so we can't go. No, that's why you bring someone else in
Right.
you
Another
know
reason to have an assistant. I always had this system of 6 months on, 6 months off because I'm a writer as well. I was an actor for a while. I just could not see myself working a whole year and having a happy life. But for me, that's been a key to longevity for me is not working all year. And let's face it, some years you're not even going to get 6 months, and you get less anxious about that if you know that's your way of surviving the industry anyway.
I think another thing that can help survive the, because people are just worried about their bills and stuff,
Yeah.
that may be to like learn how to, and I can't say that I did it, but learn how to use your, financially use your money
Oh,
more wisely so that you can take those days off or weeks off, or, or turn down a project, because you're not there yet. But I think that the industry kind of teaches us that like we just keep going into the next one because you might not work again or something like that. That kind of mentality. I would have to say early on, I might have had that same mentality, but pretty much raising kids was my motivational force to keep working, to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. And so I didn't really go back to back as much. I realized that I needed 2 weeks to 3 weeks to decompress before I
mhm.
needed to go and do another job. But then were times that, I did go back to back, and back to back, I might have had a week in between or something like that, or I did a commercial in between, that kind of a thing. But I think we just have to have that conversation a little bit more, and maybe some of the more experienced script supervisors to really tell the truth. It's hard. We're used to at least working 10 to 12 hours. We're just used to it. And
Mhm.
I think you just build up that muscle. But we just have to be honest that I am tired. By the grace of God go I, that I made it home. I've fallen
Yes.
asleep many a time, and by the grace of God go I.
Oh, I never learned how to drive, and I think if I did, I would be dead by now. Never learned how to drive on purpose. Yeah.
It's kind of scary, and then we do have the statistics of, people dying from sleep deprivation, or like, just are sleeping at the wheel and stuff like that. They did try to get the hours down, but it was us, the crew, who were like, no, they want to make that money.
Yeah, I was like so rooting for you guys with that's why I posted that video about the obituaries because I was like, this is our chance to work like the Europeans. Listen, I worked in Europe last year. We did 6 to 10 hour days. We made an incredible movie, #1 in the world. It was Another Simple Favor. It's a comedy. I love comedy. But like we made a movie in 6 to 10 hours a day. And this is not the first, and you know this from working in Europe. It's like they do this all the time. They make fine
But
movies
all the
there.
time. 10 hours. Usually it's a 10-hour day. And if they were going to go over, they'd like tell you by lunchtime that they're going over. Okay, today we're going to go over an hour. So prepare yourself. But that was, few and far between. And
Yes.
it's not going to change. I mean, all you can do is keep fighting for it until
Yep.
you get a generation in there that just says, no, we're not doing this, or now we're not going to work like this. But um, because we make good money compared to a lot of people, other crafts or other industries, then, we're going to always, have that because the money is kind of sort of good.
But we are in charge of our own selves, and we can,
Yes.
we can regulate how much we're gonna really do that to our bodies. And I always say to young people in their 20s, sure, you're at a time where maybe you can work more than 6 months a year for now, but don't make it a habit because you're gonna regret it when you look back. And listen, if I go back to think back to my 20s, I wish I was doing the kind of traveling I'm doing now back then, rather than really, I was a workaholic. I was a workaholic.
I just, work. I don't mind having a work ethic, and
Yeah.
again, I started the script supervising, I think it was 34.
Oh wow, I was
Yeah.
21. I was
Yeah.
20.
I think it was because, yeah, I think it was 34, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was like my kind of my second career because I was talent at first, and
Yeah.
that's kind of in the cheerleading and all that kind of stuff. We did, besides out there cheering on the field, we did singing and dancing and promotions and the hostess for the mostest is what I used to call it. So that was one career, and then I moved into the script supervising, became another, it was my kind of sort of my second career, and then I think teaching is kind of sort of a career,
Oh
but
yeah.
you just keep evolving. It's not the matter of working. It's just the matter of like, yes, we do need to be a little bit just more conscious of our health.
Mhm.
That we go and take the tests that you need to take or the annual things, or to be active. Be active on set. There's been times where, especially if you work on a studio lot, sometimes you get together and people will walk, at lunchtime around the
Yeah.
thing. Sometimes people will play basketball or whatever. That kind of a thing.
Yoga. They
It
do
is
all
to
that.
try to incorporate, and you can't do that if you are adding, if you're working through your lunch. That's another thing. People need to stop and stop working through their lunch and say, when, besides send your lunch report, which an assistant could be doing,
Yes.
send the lunch report and then go eat lunch.
I do want to talk about the about teaching, because we are two teachers, but you're so incredible. And you said it's your 12th year. I was surprised. I thought you were doing it as long as me, but like, hey, we were called to teach when we were called to teach. And tell us like your, I kind of have an idea of it, but like your perspective, like what your course is about, and like what your angle is on the profession and all that.
So my course has been online for 12 years, but I have been teaching for like about 25.
Yes,
And
yes,
so the first time that I did my class, I think I had only been a script supervisor for 2 years, and someone came out to me, teach me.
yes.
I was like, okay. And then I think maybe I pretty much only did one class a year because
Me
I was a
too.
working
Back
script
then.
supervisor.
Back
Yeah,
then,
back
yes.
then. And so then I started, and it would be odd. People would just call me all at the same time. Strangers are calling at the same time. And I go, oh, okay, I guess I'll give class now. And so then, probably 10 years in, I started writing out my lessons, and now I use a workbook. So, my approach to the craft, or the way that I look at the craft, I believe, and I don't think it's a dirty word, that we do use secretarial skills. So, I think secretarial skills, or being a secretary, was a craft in itself.
Mhm.
I learned to type before there was erasable typing paper. A lot of people don't even know there was erasable typing paper. To me, that the craft is secretary, which is the paperwork, and then it's the filmmaking side. I look at my paperwork as artistry. I think that my forms that I send in is a representation of me because I know how to make forms and stuff like that, and that's some of the first things that I teach. One of my students was able to get a job with someone who was able to negotiate having a script PA because I guess they were going someplace remote or whatever. And she was one of my students. She went in and interviewed, got the job. And so, like, we met so I can like try to tell her as much as I can, and so she was telling me the first thing that she had to do was create a form. I said, you had to create a form? She goes, yes, I had to create a form. It's like the first lesson that I teach. So I believe that there is artistry in our forms and how we do our line pages and all like that. Right.
Yes.
So I spend, time on that. Then that's what I believe, that that is part of your, when you send out a form, it reflects on you. Then the other part, as a filmmakers, I just believe that we really need to learn the craft.
Yes.
Typing your notes is not the craft, it's a system. Understanding everything that is in every column of those things, that is part of the craft, to know in the camera, the camera angle column, all the information that is needed. And it might not come to you that way, and learning how to get that information so that you can fill out that column correctly. I believe in the description, because we are talking, and I think it was Sharon Reynolds, who is like a 40-year, I think she's retired and not kind of so retired, but she's got 40 years. She got 10 years on me, I believe. And she said that we need to start using the language that we have technical notes. We
Yeah.
need to be talking technical. That is part of our craft. If you start dumbing it down, it makes them think that anybody can do it. If you don't call it a medium shot, and you call it a medium wide, whatever, just like this crazy, I've seen some crazy stuff. It's not technical. It's not that many camera angles, y'all. It really isn't. Not that many. It's just how, they kind of sort of use them. But if we stop talking technical, if we stop, or creating, abbreviations they never, no one has ever heard of. Like, I should be able to pick up your notes, and in your notes, I should be able to find the technical information, especially if they like, hey, what hand was it? Hey, what was the screen direction? And you ain't got it in the notes. You are not writing technically. And we have our script notes are technical notes because we talk in a technical language. That takes training.
Yes. Yes.
So I believe in that. I'm very strong in that. You will lose the craft if you keep dumbing it down. It's not a top sheet, it's a daily progress report. Some people just shorten it off and call it a progress report. If you don't even know that, if you don't even know the history, we're not passing down our history.
You know what's interesting? On some of the trade tests in the unions here, I know not every local trade test, but in some of them here, they're making people fill out the top sheet, or sorry, the daily progress report manually, and people don't know how to do that. Shocking. It's
You're
shocking.
not learning the craft. You
Yeah.
should, again, type in it. I've always typed my, work. I,
Yeah.
I started typing my work, because I was a secretary, and I wanted, and presentation of the paperwork is important to me. So
Yeah.
I started typing early on, and people were looking at me, and I was like, I don't care what you say. This is Don Gilliam. Don Gilliam hands in her work typed,
Yeah.
but I learned how to do it, but I still wrote it down first. You're right,
Yes.
and then you transfer,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, the people don't know. They don't know how to fill things out because they're not getting trained. I do get people who will ask me, hey, this person is interested, what is your recommendation? Go take a class. You don't have to necessarily take my class, but just take a class so
I
that you
say
can
the
learn
same
the
thing.
basics.
I always say there's at least three of us in North America who do comprehensive, and there's more coming up, and there's more in other countries. Take one of our classes. It's a luxury that we didn't have when we started.
No, no, we were either learning, or, I mean, I went to Jim Kelly Durgan,
Yeah.
and a lot of times, a lot of people didn't like him. I loved him. He was exactly what I needed. His
Yeah.
style is whatever, like I ate it up like a sponge. Yes, I think that we are losing. We have to keep it technical.
Mhm.
And then when you are trying to negotiate, when you're trying to talk to somebody about the craft, and it's even the directors, when you're trying to make your case, you have to talk. I find when you talk technical, they listen more. I
Yeah.
don't think that this is going to cut because you've got this wide shot, and then blah 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 blah. Instead of like, I don't think it's going to do. If you can't explain yourself, you got to explain yourself technically. I don't dummy it down. And some people aren't really into filmmaking. Like,
Mhm.
I didn't know no better. So like when the director and the DP and the first AD is huddling, I'm gonna go over there and huddle with you.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
I
exactly.
want to know what's going on because a lot of times they don't know how to communicate all the way down to us, and we like the last to know about something. No, I like you huddle it, I'm gonna go over there. And so a lot of times they would go, "Oh, you want anything? No, just want to know, what the game plan is. Sounds like y'all game planning over here. I want to know."
Because
I come up with these little things, to to make them easy, that my presence there. I think also how to start to be part of the team is to go to those meetings.
oh yeah, oh my God, I'm all over them in prep. I don't care if I'm invited or not. I'm there.
Doesn't matter if you're invited or not. Go to the meetings because then when they see that you're there, you don't necessarily have to speak up, but you can start hearing the language because everybody just kind of speaks or, they talk about the story a certain way. We look
Yes.
at the story one way, they talk about it another way because they've been there talking about it a couple of weeks before you got there.
Plus, they see you and they go, oh yeah, I better tell D, I better tell Daniela. Yes, it's like they see you there, they know you're there, and they know you're there to work and to participate and
And
to
to
be there.
participate, yeah. And then we use our skills because sometimes you're in their meeting and then later on down the line you go, oh no, remember in the meeting you wanted this and this and this and everybody like, oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, because we're the ones who are the no, we listen and we hear and we hear the details and stuff like that. It starts to give you like ideas of how they're gonna shoot that scene and stuff like that. I just feel that you should be a part of that. And then a lot of times people don't know is about the speaking up. A lot of people, this is my sentiment about the films. This is their film, ain't our film. My name is script supervisor. If I walk up to you and I say, hey, I think it's technically wrong, and they're like, oh, no, off my back. It's not my film.
But I write it down in the notes,
I
director.
write it down in the notes to cover my behind when we get in a post.
Yeah,
And then sometimes it only takes them a couple of days when the editor calls up and say, why is this not match or this don't match?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then they remember that you brought you and that your friend, the people that you're working with, probably had that call and say, hey, this is not matching. But no one knew, what was the script supervisor doing on set?
yeah.
So you want to speak up, and you might be right sometimes, and sometimes you are wrong, you know.
And also sometimes there is no right and wrong because it's still art and it's still up to the director, or the showrunner, depending on who's got the power. But hey, we're still there to speak up, and people will still, as much as it might feel tense in the moment, people rely on you to do that, to an extent that is we still get our day. We still everything moves forward, but we speak up at the right times or the right. I don't believe in right and wrong in art, but still we have to participate. And if they say no, like you said, it's their movie. We just cover our butts because I know people who have been fired for not saying I told the director da da da. Like cover yourself. So at least the editor can say when they call up the director, it was right and the script supervisor told you. Why didn't you listen?
Exactly. I mean, I remember doing a commercial. I was doing this commercial and I said something, I said something and we were standing at the monitors and I think it was the agency guy walked up and he put his little 2 cents in, right? And then I whatever, I said what I said. And then the next day they were coming up, the editors loves your notes. I said, oh, can I talk to him? And that agency guy was there. And he was like, so he stopped, didn't anytime I spoke up past that, then he kept it quiet. Yeah, because I was correct. Oh, the editor likes, and blah blah.
Well, yeah, I mean, they don't know what they don't know, right? So it's like sometimes agency people are brand new.
They don't
they know
know.
copy, but they don't know filmmaking. Yeah, I know.
You
It's so
just have to get a tough skin.
yeah.
That's what they say. A tough skin, but looks, soft, a tough skin, but, still be kind of sort of meek, to know like, and I have one story that I just find is kind of hilarious is that I was on Magnificent Seven and Denzel Washington was on there. And I remember the DP, because I wasn't going to dailies. And so the DP goes in the, from the dailies, he goes, he talks to you kind of bad. And I was like, doesn't bother me. He being an actor doing his thing. It doesn't bother me. And so he goes, oh, because he kind of talks to you bad. And I was like, whatever. So the last day when he was finished, we still had more shooting, but that was Denzel's last day. And I went up to him. I always go up and I greet, the actor and tell him, you did a wonderful job. And and sincerely, and so I was like, oh, you did a wonderful job. Oh, that was before his last days, he had gotten the green light to do Fences, and he was going to be the director. And so I noticed that he was starting to come into Video Village and start asking me technical questions. He was asking me camera questions. He was asking me things and stuff like that. And I just answered, him. And then that last day when it was time for him to leave, and I said, oh, you did a wonderful job. It was, pleasure working with you. And, good luck on, directing your film. He goes, oh, I wish I can get you. And I said, but he goes, but you're too expensive. I said, huh, call, I might be available. And he goes, really? I go, yeah, and he called and I was available.
And he probably people think we're so expensive, but they don't realize it's not necessarily that bad. Because they're willing to pay camera people like so much more than us sometimes. And when they put it in perspective, they go, well, it's actually not that expensive.
I think that they just kind of sort of, I don't know. And I think a lot of times that they don't know how much we really do
Yeah.
make
Yeah,
until
exactly.
until you get into that deal memo, So, but yeah, no, you just have to get a thick skin, And I think that my thing going on after that, I was going on to another big project. So it was like, psh, please, water off my back.
That was a great story, by the way. Do you have any other moments like that that were big learning moments for you that you'd like to share? Whether it's about longevity, whether it's about getting respect. Oh, I have some stories about getting respect, that kind of stuff.
Well, you tell a story about getting respect and see if I can like think about
Okay,
it.
I'll tell you a story that was really important to me because I was very not a good negotiator for most of my career. That's why I find it very important to teach it now. Um, we had this meeting in 2014 with all the script supervisors or most of the script supervisors in Toronto. And we sat down, we talked rates, we talked conditions, we talked everything. And I realized that even though I was one of the more experienced script supervisors at the table, and even though I had just done, I won't tell you what show, 60 episodes of one show, I was at that moment the lowest paid script supervisor in Toronto. And I said, what? And I was in shock actually, because I always thought I was negotiating. So I walked in, we were about to go into season 5, and I walked in and I said, I found out I'm the lowest paid script supervisor in Toronto. And I think as one of the only script supervisors in Toronto right now who's going into season 5 on a show, that we need to do something about that. The PM opened his book and he started laughing. He goes, you must be a terrible negotiator because you are the lowest paid key on this crew. And I said, pardon? Because every year I go in and they said we're all making the same and we're all getting the same raise. And they're like, well, there's a way that the network rewards people who have come in later seasons. And I was like, but they don't reward the people that stayed on the show and had to talk to the showrunner every day. I was in shock. So luckily, one of my mentors is Nell Scovell, who co-wrote Lean In. And I was in LA talking to Nell about, I said, I'm going into this contract negotiation and I'm in shock. And she said, you have to be willing to walk away. You have to decide what you want, decide what your bottom line is. And if they're not going to give it to you, you're going to, and she said, and if it's not about money, is it about directing? Is it about, for me, I'm a writer. So I said, fat chance they're going to give me a chance to write on this major show. But I will ask because we had web series and stuff. So the web series were canceled that year. I knew my bottom line. They weren't meeting it. And I walked away. And they were in shock that I had walked away. They weren't even going to give me, it was a few $100 raise a week. It was really nothing. And the director, they had switched DOPs, they had switched directors, showrunners, and he lost it. He lost it on the PM and said, how could you lose our only like consistent crew
Or
member for a few $100s? He lost it on him. But by that point, it was too late. I was already like on to something else with my writing. And so, but anyway, cut to that whole year, I just started to say no to everything. And I'm not saying that I was saying no to everything. Nothing was meeting my standard of writing, like of scripts that were coming in, of money, of conditions. I just kept saying no. And then I kept getting offered bigger and bigger and bigger projects until I got a $200 million feature offer and I got the job and I've since made like my income literally doubled, literally doubled that year because I learned how to say no. And listen, I said no for 6 months, but then when the right project came along, that brought more projects. So sometimes you just don't be afraid to stand your ground. Things, if you're looking around and going, wait a minute, like I do deserve more than this. We deserve more than this as a yeah.
Yeah, as a craft and stuff, the negotiating tips that I like learned early on was like, well, actually, it was from Boys in the Hood. There's like three of us that went on to do poetic justice that came from Boys in the Hood because John only did a project a year, once a year, so it would be a full year. And so I remember talking to the Grip, and he was saying that he how much he made, and he almost made $5 more an hour than I did. And I was like, not that his work is in less important than mine, but come on, So when I went in to negotiate that deal, I remember saying that, the guy goes, well, how much is your rate? And I said, well, I should be getting at least as much as the grip, the key grip. And he was like, you're right. And I got a raise. It's like it's learning that. And then I kind of sort of got settled in and I forgot all about negotiating. And then because back in the day, I would listen to tapes. You used to be able to go to the library and get cassette tapes. And then I would like listen to negotiating set. I used to have a whole series. And I give everything away. So I must have given it away, but I had these little cards with it. And I kind of have kept those cards to remember some of the techniques, because negotiating is a technique and it's a principle. And you got to practice at it, right? So when I went to go, we did in Local 871, we did a pay equity study. It was independent people who didn't really know anything about our craft or, and did their homework or whatever. And we were trying to do a pay equity thing when the contract was coming up. And so when I read, like you, found out that I was at the 75 percentile. I wasn't at 100. I thought I was like, being considered a top script supervisor, that I was making top money, and I wasn't. So then I think the next thing I had to go do was Star Wars the second. I mean, yeah, Star Wars the second time. And I
Wow.
said, I'm asking. So I had decided that I did my homework. I started talking to different people, basically the 161. I saw their contract, blah, 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 whatever I could have joined 161. And that was one of my things. I said, I can join 161 to get the rate. Why make me go through that? Just give it to me. That's basically what I said. So I found out how much they were given, and so because there is a disparity, found out and got nothing to do with nothing. It was about a personal relationship is why they got so much money. And then just as the years go on, you get that 3% raise, and it just goes up and up and up. So they got all kinds of excuses, but I found out through the source how they got their raise, how they got that money to go up like that. And so I started to just ask for that. So at the time, I think that they were at 60 and change or 61 and change or whatever. And so I would ask for 60. I wasn't making that much before. So, or I would go up a little and then they come down. You go up a little and then they come down. But I basically asked for their rate. And I never really got any pushback.
Yeah, because they know that people are making that rate and they're
They're
script
making that
supervisors.
rate. And I went and I found a lady, and this is something that I did try to bring to the union, was to get a negotiator. This woman wanted to work with us. She teaches at Stanford, and she would train some executive women at Google. She saw our plight, and she was going to come in and lower her rate and try to get her to come and give us some classes. And the people that were in charge, had a lot of pushback and stuff. So I just did it on my own. I reached out to a few supervisors, and they, there was, I think we had a handful, maybe like 20 people who paid to, listen to this woman and to learn some negotiating tools. It's like you have to prepare yourself. You have to think ahead, and because you might not negotiate but 2 or 3 times a year, you're a
Yeah.
little rusty.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You're a little rusty. So, you forget things. I forget rap all the time. I always forget rap. And then it's like, ugh, and then thank God I do a good job. And I say, I need about a week of rap. And they go, oh yeah, 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 whatever you want done. But sometimes they're like, oh, you didn't negotiate that. But yeah, the one funny story that I could tell, there's two stories that I could tell you. I do love working with J.J. Abrams. He's one of the funniest mans and the smartest man that I ever did see. I had the pleasure of seeing him grow, you know, um, where our first project together was the pilot of Lost. And I was kind of like, suggesting a lot of stuff. And then sometimes, how we like to not cross that line. There's always that line. You don't want to be crossing it. He'd be like, no, just tell me. He wanted me to tell him exactly what it was that he needed to do or we needed to do. And it's like, you need to move the camera over here. It's like, and the DP was there too. Yeah, what do we need to do? No one had no whatever, so that was, I always remember that. But one of the things that we do as script supervisors, we get things in a pattern. Things become automatic kind of a thing. Our routine, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at that, I write down this, I go, we it has to go into our routine. So we were, on the beautiful beaches in Hawaii, and we were getting ready to do this very big explosive shot. And so I was in the tent, and I think I was in the tent with, I think it was a makeup girl or something like that. And I had the monitors. Well, they were having a fight, camera was having a fight with the video playback. And this was before we had the VTRs, before VTR like they are now. This was like they hired this kid to be he knew a little bit of the camera, and he was in the camera department, but he wasn't union. And so they hired him to do the VTR to record. And then back in the day, you had did the recording right on the monitor, kind of a thing. You just push the button. And so there was a big fight maybe a couple of days before, and they didn't want this kid touching the monitors to start the video playback. So they go, okay, Don, you do it. And then I was like, as we do, we take on too much that we shouldn't be taking on because we just trying to play nice. So I was like, oh, okay, So, it takes, a while. It is a big explosion. So it's going to take, a couple hours and stuff. And then we kind of like, are getting ready, and everybody's on point and everything. And you go, 3, 2, 1, kapoom. I look at the girl and say, girl, I forgot to push the button. I missed the explosion. And then the look on JJ's face when he came around that corner to look at that tent, I had to say, yeah, I didn't push the button. But I said, it went kaboom. And I said, girl, I forgot to push the button.
That's on them for not hiring a playback person, of course, right? Do you know what's
Putting something on us that is not in our wheelhouse because I'm up there looking at it too. I'm ready to like.
Do you know that I have a student in Indonesia and she told me this shocked me. She said in Indonesia, the script supervisor is also the video playback person and they have to set up monitors. So she said in Indonesia, we have a department of 4, but we're moving monitors around. I said, what in the actual, like, what? And so she was getting depressed hearing how we do it in North America because, like, but I said, you guys can stick together and say these are two different departments. It'll take a lot of work, but
Yeah, but you have to just be consistent. If you consistently do it, that's how it forges ahead. Yeah, sometimes you ask for the first time and it happens, and then sometimes you just got to keep asking it until it happens.
now I do want to take questions from the floor, but before that, I really want to ask you, what is next for you?
Well, I am in retirement mode, of which I'm learning to do that, which, I think there's a lot of decompression going on. We have a mental job and we have to just decompress from that. I've been working, a long time and I'm, I don't mind not working. Some people cannot believe that I am finished with script supervising and that I don't miss it. I don't miss it, and I'm good with that. I think everything comes to an end. It was more like, you're on a road and then the road ends and then it's gravel. Yeah, that's me. I just came to the end of the road. I'm cool with it. I do have my businesses. I do have my craft. I do have the online course, the art of continuity. My goal, and maybe you guys, some people can help. My goal is to get my workbook in shape, and my goal is to get my course, um, I think, in better shape or whatever so that I can leave it, so it can be a
Yeah.
legacy.
Yeah.
Just like Pat Miller and Mary, did leave that legacy. So I'm working towards that. I still, take students on because I realize that I just teach the craft of script supervising. Now, getting work and the temperature of the industry, I have to, that is my burnt out. I have to step back from that.
Mhm. Mhm.
I can't help and think, and if I was still working, I would like, be all into it and, know the latest this and know the latest that and network. I always say just network, whatever. But I realize that I teach the craft of script supervision. And now you getting work, and can't nobody promise you work in any of these fields. You got to go out there and get it yourself. I might give you little tips, but I can't wrap my head around it or be involved. Then I have my date my makeup, which is creation to put labels, expiration labels on your makeup, and I'm trying to rebrand that, and I'm trying to get some new labels out and just kind of get into there. But right now, I have found that I just have got to decompress.
Mhm.
I got to work on my house. I got I've been, doing, I finally got a new bedroom, painting and window, blinds and a new bed. I had never in all my years did that. I always had hand-me-downs.
Yeah, me
From
too.
my
No, no,
mom.
I get it. I don't even own a house. I'm a renter.
So yeah, so I'm kind of like doing that, but I'm hoping to get to the place where and I do have, and working on my health. I would just like to get back into, kind of exercising. I haven't left my house in a week. It's kind of good and then it's kind of not good. I feel I'm decompressing, I'm transitioning, and so I like doing like this. I like talking about the craft, elevating the craft, as much as I can. I like speaking, and so it helps me, do it. It helps me because I want to pour out. I'm in legacy mode. I just want to
Yeah.
pour out everything that Don Gilliam knows. I just want to keep pouring it out, like I said, it depends on what kind of hamburger you want. You can go to 10 joints to get a hamburger, and so I just want to do that. So that's what's next for me.
Speaking gigs, with like in
Yeah,
addition
I'm
to
thinking of that. Yeah, because like I do well at the speaking. I like it. I try to be motivational. Anybody who asks, I go, and it's not just for script supervising, but for filmmaking or being in this craft, and I just try to, just like I said before, these are my mottos. I only want to be where I'm supposed to be. I'm not, no one can take my job from me. These kind of little mindsets that, so I don't mind speaking on it and being very motivational about it. This is a great industry. This is
yes.
a great craft, and I've had a few students who've gone on who are prominent directors now, and
Yes.
have that base, and so you can do anything, and I'm not trying to get people in this craft that aren't like I got a call the other day, and the person really is a screenwriter, and they just wanted to make, they just wanted to broaden their horizons of learn of knowing other different crafts. And I said, my course is very detailed. It's for being a script supervisor. I said, but I do talk about the script and I took about, and I could pull something together just for you, and we would do it on a consultation. I'm not trying to just sell anybody this, being a script supervisor. To this day, I still don't know what makes a good script supervisor. There are certain qualities, but really the characteristic of a script supervisor, everybody different.
We're all different.
Everybody's different.
But your frontline experiences on some of the most iconic films in our time, that alone should be enough to launch a speaking career on filmmaking and on motivate. Because listen, we're at a time in the industry when we feel lost. Everybody feels lost. We forget the joy of filmmaking. And I think just motivating people to love making movies again. We're in an era right now where it's the rise of the creator. Like,
Yeah.
people say our position will be, I don't think our position will be extinct. It will change in nature, yes, but it will not be extinct. However, where our crews are going to get smaller and creators are going to start popping up but they need people like you and me to motivate them. Like we actually do. We build directors in our programs. That's certainly what we've both been doing for years without realizing it. It's all tied to our profession. Directing is tied to what we do.
I've had a few people, and one person is out there. He is a stunt director, and
Yeah.
he knew he was gonna. And I don't know how. Oh, he just knew he was just a stuntman on a few shows that I worked on, and he said, "I want to do a consultation with you." That's how I get into consulting, And I had a 2 hour consultation. He had his questions, and he asked me a few things of what he should be looking out for and like that. And then like maybe every time I see something that he posts, I like always like it and stuff. And he says, "Thank you." He goes, "You really helped me, to have a certain mindset when it comes to selecting a script supervisor or whatever about filmmaking and all like that kind of good stuff." But yeah, that's that there's so much, and this is where just like thinking about doing that's work. And I am at that decompression mode. I need
Yeah.
these are things like, yeah, I want to do it, but it's like first down, you need to decompress, I need to not get the headache, I need to just like not think. Every time I think, it's about how can I work? How can I work here?
But some things don't feel as much like work, like inspiring people. I love that. I don't think you'll ever stop inspiring
Like
people.
this doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, but we are
This
very.
doesn't feel like work.
Alexia says, I had a lady here in New Zealand tell me it's a dying department and not needed in the future. How can I specifically counter that simply? Well, go ahead. I have an answer for that. That's in a video on my.
My first thing is like, who's going to write down what the camera shoots so that the editor knows what's on the film? So getting the film, someone's still got to write it down, and that costs more than having a
Oh,
person. And then also it's like, who's going to be looking out for, and then this is where you start talking about the craft. Who's going to look for the continuity and matching? Because, and then you start talking about kind of keeping it technical. You got to bring the technical in there.
well,
Yes, we're the third eye. We're the
I
third creative person besides the director and the DP. You need the script supervisor there to kind of be the glue.
I have a different view of it that's along those lines, but I think of it as the psychology, like because AI might be able to do our notes in future. That would be fun if it really could, if we could dictate it. Obviously, if it didn't
Yeah.
automatically do the notes, but and it might even be able. Who knows, right? Who knows what's going to happen with AI? They might be able to catch matching, but they can't do the preventative work that we do, the troubleshooting, the psychological, like
Mhm.
that talking to the director and just
Actors.
actors, oh my God, right? Exactly.
Right.
And because I still think actors, no matter what happens with AI, they still need actors, and actors also need us. So our those skills, the softer skills that are more important, I think, will come to the forefront. They will come to the forefront.
Well, the new medium of which I saw your thing, the new medium of the verticals, at least they were smart enough to the script supervisors have been there from the beginning. I
Yeah.
said someone knew something. It's a faster pace, it's a great training ground for people also, but they came with the script supervisor from the beginning because they knew.
Nikki Green, we need an official international, that's a great idea. An international association of script supervisors defining what we do, our processes, standards, maybe fee ranges. We need legendary script supervisors to lend their names to add legitimacy. The organization would serve as a professional catalyst for clearing up confusion about our role. Can I tell you a story? We just had our meetup in London. In Poland, they made it illegal to call us a secretary. I know we use secretary in a positive, but there a script supervisor who was a leading activist there felt it was demeaning to our profession. The way that we hate it when people call us scripty, I hate that. I hate
Yeah.
that. And so she actually made it. I don't know if this is true. One of my Polish students in the UK said, no, she put it into law. They cannot refer to us by not our title on on a film set.
Never, I've never been called a secretary. I mean, oh, like that girl, that woman, when I first started back in the 90s said I'm like the secretary on the staff.
No,
I
no,
just
it's
say
the official
secretary.
title. In certain countries, we are the secretary of the director, or the secretary of the editor.
Oh,
It's
oh,
shocking,
I've
right?
never heard that. Yeah, no.
It's shocking. But as one of my students says, well, secretary just means the keeper of secrets, which that's an interesting thought. Sure, but I like the idea. What do you think of an international alliance, an association?
Well, whatever it would take to get people to come together, just like we did during COVID, where you have people talking. I don't know if you need an organization as much as a group chat, or a Facebook thingy, type of thing to come together and have an agenda and to talk about these things because there'll be progress in that. So just like one of the things that happened during COVID that we talked about, 161, I think just had in their contract to join a reason 2 years of related experience. I think that they read what the was. Ours is you have to have 100 paid days. Well, now they have 100 paid days. You got to have something. You need someone to go out there and prove that they can go and do the job at least.
Yeah.
And so they changed their thing through a conversation.
Hmm.
So I don't know about, if it has to be a national organization or if it's just we need to start talking at least twice a year or something about these things and about the duties because people are taking on duties that we should not be taking on unless we get an assistant. And when they're putting more duties on you, don't automatically say yes
Yeah, 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 yeah,
because it's
yeah.
more work. And then what do? Complain. So
Yeah. And in prep when they say something that's like because we now I go to all I've always in the last 10 years gone to all the post workflow meetings and stuff and I'll cut it off in prep like whatever is unreasonable or if I know a better way to do it or a different way to do it fix it in
exactly.
prep.
Exactly. That is it. And these are the things that we need to teach. These are the things because, a lot of people don't even experience script supervisors don't know about a workflow meeting, and what goes on in there and stuff like that. And so we're not, because the craft has evolved just like their workflow meeting. When they first got started, I remember they send out the people that were, it's usually the people who is processing the film will be the people that kind of like do the meeting. And then I remember when it used to be like 2 pages. It's now up to 16, or it's a whole pamphlet of how, because it has evolved. And so we need to evolve with it. A veteran script supervisor should not go, I've never been to a workflow meeting.
Yeah. Do you go on I always go on the tech survey. Do you do that?
I don't, sometimes I go and sometimes I don't. It just depends. It depends on when I get there.
Yeah, yeah.
A
I
lot of
always
times
ask.
they don't have me, there or because it's always someplace else. I barely worked in
Yes.
Los Angeles, so they're not bringing me, I'm not flying in as soon, they're not flying me. But when I'm able, I do go, and then those have gotten developed too. They come with packets too. You know,
Yep.
they're
Floor
starting to come with
plan.
packets, Charlotte, kind of the shooting kind of schedule, ish. But yeah, everything evolves and you just want to be a part of it. And so we should evolve. We can't keep being a one person department.
Molly says, how do you make the jump to working and booking the job on bigger productions? That's a long answer. That's something I could definitely do a video on, but do you have a short answer?
Well, quickly, it's like if you just go for it.
Yeah.
People go, oh, you're gonna get pigeon-toed. No, I've done a pigeonhole. No, I've done everything. You call me, Don's working. If Don's available, I'm working. First come, first serve opportunity script supervisor. I never have pigeonholed myself. Now, I did enough television. I did films first for 12 years or something. And then that's when I started to get into television. And then once I got into television, I did that for a hot minute until I put a line in the sand and I said, I'm done with television and I'm
Hmm.
just going back to my films. And then that's what I kind of did. Do my little commercials in between time or wraparounds or whatever you want to call them. They're all the same thing, commercials. And so like I would do those in between time. So I never turned down work.
Hmm.
So you don't
Oh,
get yourself
I
pigeonholed.
do I do have a bit of an answer for this. And Tony Patine said he did the same thing. It was interesting to hear him say that. Be intentional with the projects that you choose. So I had the opportunity to make a lot more money on a project with a terrible script than when I got offered my Big Fat Greek Wedding. When I read that script, I mean, I got offered the interview. I read that script and I went, this is going to be huge. Like this is going to be huge. And I would begged for the job. I never walk in, by the way, never, it's a bad negotiating tactic to walk in begging for the job. But I was like in awe. I said, this is going to be huge. Like I had a student who was Greek who was up for the job. I said, I know I'm not Greek, but I made my case for why I want to do this job. That choice to work on that script versus that script for a third of the pay made my career as a comedy script supervisor. Tony Patine was saying he made choices about the quality and kinds of, because there's all different kinds. We all have different tastes. Some of my students love horror. One of my students who said that ended up working on Sinners. It's like you make a choice of it. You have an idea of what you love and you go for it, and then you do it. You try to align, let the universe, let things come to you, but also what aligns with you when you read it. Read the script before you take a job. Interview
That
with
is
the
the
director.
thing. Yeah, read the script. And it's interesting because you say it's interesting that you say that. And from my point of view, it's like, yeah, no, as a working mother, yeah, no, I'm taking the jobs that come my way. I'm assuming that I'm not going to get nothing bad. And so, like, there's only been like I didn't do Players Club, Ice Cube, because I didn't want to see a bunch of naked women.
Yeah.
You should read the script so that when you're in your interview that you have something intelligent to say about the story. Like either you liked it or you don't, or you think you can't wait to see this particular scene, or can't wait to shoot this scene, that type of thing. Because there's been a couple of times where we'll do a scene and then they shoot it, and I go, I was wondering how you're going to shoot that scene, you know. So be involved in the project and yes, read the thing. But yeah, that's interesting. It's like, no, yes, being intentional is intentional. No, whatever came my way, I did it. And then that's how I learned if I liked something or not, also.
That's true. At
What
the
I
beginning,
don't like,
yeah.
sitcoms. Can't stand them. Would fall asleep. Took over for somebody and I tried it, I did it or whatever. I was able to do all kinds of stuff. They loved me, so I was doing all kinds of stuff. I wasn't in the booth. I got someone to teach to be in the booth, and I was on the floor during show days because I couldn't stand it. I didn't like it. I was really falling asleep during like their rehearsals. I was like, it was so boring to me, and I was afraid I was going to lose my creativity.
Mm. Hmm.
So when they were up for the next season, I said, all right, you might want to look for somebody else. And they're like, you're not coming back. What you got? I go, I didn't have nothing. I just knew I can't do that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You got to be happy. That was how I stopped working in sci-fi. There were so many sci-fi shows shooting in Canada in the 90s. I'm like, I'd rather work on an art film, or a comedy.
But you don't know until you do it. You just gotta like find, I did a horror, but it was like, Vampire in Brooklyn. But I am not a horror person. But what was more horrifying was Nip Tuck because they were cutting and all that blood and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes they'd be like, It was worse. It was worse than a horror.
Dawn, thank you so much.
Welcome. This was fun. This
Yeah,
was
yeah,
great.
it's always fun.
I
It's
hope
always
I helped.
sure did. Yeah, you're very like you're wonderful to listen to. You're very inspiring. I do hope you have like a speaking career beyond this, and also we're both. I think we're both writing books, so I think we both are going to write our books.
Yeah, got to,
Got to.
you have to. You got to leave a legacy, I believe, especially if you've been doing it this long. I think I know we're supposed to. We're not
Yeah.
supposed to leave here and not pass on what we have learned.
Congratulations on the
I appreciate that. I
incredible career.
thank you. It's been an honor. It really is. I loved my career. I
Yeah.
really did. But it was time to move on and do something new.
The
And that's
door's open
okay.
for
Yeah.
bigger and even more wonderful things. Love you,
Thank
Dawn.
you. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. Appreciate you.